Hey everyone, welcome to the Question Everything podcast. Today's guest is Tracy Geltz. One of the main focuses and goals of this podcast is to be able to have guests on that I view as leaders in the community, and more importantly, great leaders when it comes to teaching young men how to be better people. And today's guest is actually my girlfriend's father, who I've gotten to know pretty well the past few years, and he is the definition of someone who takes the role of being a father and a community leader to heart and does it to the best of his ability. And there's so many things I believe we can learn from people like that. So, Tracy, thank you for joining us today on the Question Everything podcast. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks, Cam. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Yeah. So the first question I have for you, Tracy, I'm well aware that in your church, you oftentimes mentor quite a few young men that are in the adolescence, teenager phase. How different do you think their lives have been in comparison to maybe how you grew up in your childhood due to this new technology that may have been arising recently and other factors? How would you say their life has been different from yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've thought about this a lot because I previously was a scoutmaster, and now I work with the young men in our church. And I realize for me, freedom was turning 16 and getting access to an automobile, being able to drive to my friend's house or drive to a basketball game or drive to wherever we're going to hang out. For them, it starts much, much earlier in a much different way. For them, freedom is access to the internet and access to social media and being able to connect online. And so that's been a real learning curve for me, more so than them, because they've grown up with this technology. But as I realize, even my son who likes to play video games, it's his community, right? He's online with his friends, whether they be in Utah or West Virginia. We live in North Carolina, but he's getting online with friends in different states, and that's great. And that's his social outlet. But there's definitely a dramatic shift in what people view as their freedom or their hangout or their free time, and how they get influenced. We know we get influenced by those we come in contact with those we spend time with. So I'm very aware that the young men that I work with currently, that 16 to 18-year-old boys in our church, they're hanging out online with a lot of friends in a lot of different places. So it's definitely different than when I grew up.
It's such a unique experience because I feel as if your childhood was probably very similar to your father's childhood. Same relative amount of freedom, and your day-to-day is more likely spent outside for the most part. And it's definitely been a unique shift, especially at my age, I would say, because I think my age was a real transition into technology. I got my first phone when I was 10 years old and first iPhone when I was 12. So that's when all the apps and the social media really hit. I was one of the very first adopters at 13 years old, whatever it may be. But it was very odd growing up because the number one sign of freedom, I would say, especially when you turn 16, is the ability to get your driver's license and drive. Whether you have your own car or you're borrowing your parents' car, whatever it may be, that was just such a game changer when it came to your life. But even at my age, turning 16, 7 years ago now that I'm 23, I had so many friends that had no intention of ever getting their driver's license. And that was so odd for me because I'm like, what are you guys talking about? This is the sign of freedom here. And part of me just thinks that's just because my parents always put it on this pedestal of something great. But nowadays it seems as if all my friends just want like an unlimited credit card for Ubers everywhere. They prefer that over driving. So things have definitely changed. It's also been weird how I think generations before mine kind of demonized today's online interactions. I know that some of my most fondest memories growing up, some of this would say this is sad, but some would say it's just normal now. My fondest memories were playing video games with my friends at midnight who were all in different states and some even different countries. I've never laughed harder. I've never like told better stories. That was like one of the peak times of my childhood. Do you think that children nowadays are missing any sense of connection that you may have had when you were growing up?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about connection because I think that's huge, and there is a need for personal one-on-one connection, and there's group connection. I grew up playing sports, and for me, a lot of my identity was the teams I belonged to, or the teams I rooted for, and I get worried about, especially after COVID, did we lose a sense of connection? And I think the kids are doing the best they can. My kids, it's interesting because your experience of playing late night video games, I hear that all the time from the youth I mentor. Even I've got a 19-year-old son who's now working full time, but this last weekend, one of his favorite accomplishments, I think, was building out a computer with his brother-in-law. And they sat down over a weekend and built a computer, and they said, this was fun. We could probably sell this and make $400 or $500. And it's a gaming computer that's very powerful, but they were so excited about just being able to put that together in a few hours. And, I still remember my son was trying to up his computer, and he realized there was some computer chips, some video chips that had just dropped, and all the stores had limited quantity. So he was going to drive an hour to go spend the night. I said, well, you're not going to Fayetteville alone and spending the night. So I drove down with him. And as we sat in line, I realized these are a hot commodity. So we bought as many as we could. And he never even used that for his computer. He and I both turned around and sold the chips we bought. And it was just the funnest experience to realize, to see him turn on the chips, supply and demand. This is something I love to do, but just by using a little bit of knowledge where the chips were available, being able to get a couple extra chips and selling them, we both made a lot of money, and it was a fun experience. There's only one time I'll ever get to camp out with my son and go buy a a computer chip. So it's things like that really their experiences are different than my experiences, but. As far as connection, that was a way for me and him to connect. And when they built a computer, my son-in-law, my son, and my nephew, they all connected. They had a great time. And so, yeah, I think connection's really, really important. How you connect is as important as are you connecting with other individuals that are like-minded and you have something in common with, someone that you can turn to, someone that you can relate to. So I really am trying to think in this year, how do we do more connecting? How do I connect more with my kids? How do I connect more with the young men I work with?
I think it's definitely going to be the challenge of this decade, to say the least, to maintain not only connection in person with people, but to also be present in the moment while you're in the same room. It seems as if it's getting harder and harder, just because even if you're all sitting at the same dinner table, someone's going to have their phone out scrolling, someone's going to be doing something else. And I think it's harder than ever to actually capture that one-on-one time. But it seems as if you're doing your best at this moment to see what they love and learn to love that also. Whether it's probably driving to their town for computer chips, you probably don't fully understand. That's probably completely okay. But making that the reach, putting your hand out to make that connection definitely means a lot. Now, Tracy, you have had 7 kids over the span of your fatherhood so far, which is quite a lot to say the least. And I think your oldest is now, what, 25? 25, 26?
26, yeah.
26. Yep. So out of 26 years of fatherhood so far, what is the biggest lesson that fatherhood has taught you?
The biggest lesson fatherhood has taught me. I'm not sure it's the biggest lesson, but I've definitely learned that kids watch you. You are an example all the time, and they're very observant. You think they're not listening. They are listening. They are learning. And I think for me as a father, I have to remember, I'm training them from a young age. They're watching every move, um, and so that's been a real, I guess, lesson learned for me. But I think there are bigger lessons for me. I think that the most important lesson is that they know that they're loved and that they know that you care for them. Amy and I are the biggest cheerleaders for our kids. We love our kids. There's nothing more important to us than the time we get to spend with our kids. And when we all get together, the fact that they all love being together, that really, really makes us feel the best. I mean, that's the best feeling in the world when you're all together and they love being together. So I think for us, it's just knowing that we love them unconditionally, no matter what they do, no matter what they choose, no matter, who they're with. We love them no matter what. And that they know that they're supported and loved. And it's been, really, they've taught me the lessons I've learned is actually come from my kids, and they've taught me more than I think I've taught them. So it's been an incredible journey for me.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that's the case. I've seen this time and time again where parents will tell their kids, "Do what I say, not as I do." And that's a very hard thing, because you can preach the kid to act a certain way and live their life in a certain way. But if they see you doing the complete opposite, it's good luck them actually listen to what you're saying, and they'll just continue the cycle of whatever bad habits you're doing. I love how you said leading by example at the beginning. I think that really is just so important. Another thing I want to touch on, I'm at this weird point in my life. Of course, I've spent a lot more time as a child than I have a father, because no kids yet. But I've noticed that there's this kind of hero's cycle that a child goes through when it comes to the relationship with the parents. I feel as if at a very young age, they are very likely to idolize their parents, idolize their father, idolize their mother, love them unconditionally. They can do no wrong. They are superhuman, to say the least. And then once teenage years and adolescence come in, it seems as if you start to demonize some things that they do. You may not demonize them as a whole, but whether it's the rules they have about you going out or just different ways they may live your life, you may at that point of your life disagree with. And so you begin to question all these things, and you have this in your mind kind of a love-hate relationship with them. To some extent, I think for a period of time, a lot of teenagers go through that. And then when you move out of the house, and I think especially when you get into your early and probably mid-20s also, you have this level of empathy for them, because only at this point in our lives we've been able to see them as human beings. And we're like, okay, yes, I may not agree with every decision they made while parenting me. I can tell that it was coming from a great place and that they genuinely want what's best for me. And that is a huge light bulb in our minds, because every past conversation, every past experience you had with them is put into perspective, that although I hated their guts in that moment, now I understand where they were coming from. And I think it's probably pretty rewarding when Christmas time comes around and all the kids want to come back to your house. I know this firsthand, because that's Aubrey's making sure of that. When it's the Geltz' Christmas, we're going back to North Carolina, to say the least. So that's probably a pretty good feeling to have when your kids want to do that. So that's just truly, truly incredible. Another question I want to ask you, Tracy. Of the 7 kids you have, 5 of them are daughters. So you were constantly living with a wife, and at a period of time, 5 daughters. What was your secret of understanding women and being able to keep the house under control? Like, do you have any secrets that you can tell me for the future, or how'd you get through it?
no secrets on this end. Cam, I'm the youngest of four boys. I grew up with no sisters. Even my mom was maybe a tomboy, and she wasn't a tomboy, but she could coach my basketball team and then go play bridge or be in the PTA. So my mom could do everything. But I really, truly am probably the least informed when it comes to living with women. And having five girls has probably been a challenge for me. I think the biggest thing is just being patient because honestly, I growing up, I really didn't understand women's. I think women are wired differently. So when I approach a problem, I just want to solve a problem. I'm a problem solver at work and most of my daily life. I want to solve a problem, and I've realized that. A lot of time my daughter's approach to their problem is different. My wife's approach to their problems are different. And I think when you understand that, then hopefully you have some empathy and some understanding and some patience to understand maybe they just need you to listen. Maybe right now you just need to understand what they're going through. And I think that's a huge part. Earlier you mentioned being present, my wife is quick to call me out when I'm not present. If I'm having a conversation with her and I'm thinking about something else, she probably knows that. My daughter, Brielle, loves to say, Dad's the only person that can be listening to a podcast, watching ESPN, in a work meeting, and running on the treadmill. I think that's extreme and I've never done that. But I definitely am a little bit maybe ADHD and like to multitask. Sometimes I need to realize I need to be present. I need to be here. I need to be very focused. I think that's the biggest thing. And it's taken me a long time to learn, and I still have a long way to go, but really understanding, listening. And if you do those things first, and then exercise an ounce of patience, I think that's big. That'll go a long way into your daughters really, hopefully respecting you, and in the long run, appreciating you.
So Tracy, when it comes to this next generation that you helped raise, you've seen, I know firsthand, knowing you and your family, you see that you have these incredible kids that can do great things for the world. But you've also seen a world around them that at some points in time may not look too optimistic. When it comes to the future of this next generation coming up, the one that you help raise, are you optimistic about their future or pessimistic?
I'm optimistic. I tell you what, I sometimes get scared to think about the world that they live in, the world that like you said, kids living with technology, it's a different world. I think there's challenges. I think there's obstacles that we never had to deal with, and that can be scary. But at the same time, I really see the greatness of the next generation. My wife and I were talking yesterday. Our kids are here for a reason, and they're accomplishing great things, and they're going to go on to do incredible things that we don't even understand. With that said, I think it's hard because there's a lot of distractions in the world. There's a lot of things taking people off task. We talked about connection earlier, and if you're not connected and you're not grounded, it's a hard world to be in. And I think those things matter. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm optimistic. I see so much greatness in my own kids. I think every parent wants to be proud and is proud of their children. But when I look and see what, you and Aubrey are doing to make a difference, I see I've got a daughter, Brielle, in Baltimore, making a huge difference. I've got kids that want to go into noble professions, be a nurse and help others. And I've got kids that just want to do their part to contribute and raise a family. And I think that's amazing. I've got other kids that are trying to figure things out. What do I want to do? What should I be doing with my life? And I think that's amazing. And it's often not just centered on themselves. So to me, that's really fulfilling, really touches my heart.
I love that. Of course, I don't want to compare the two, but the only thing I've been exposed to so far in my life in comparison to having kids is having this new puppy that Aubrey and I rescued and are now raising here in Bali. And I've noticed myself kind of switching to parent mode sometimes, whether it comes to its nutrition, making sure it's getting the top quality food. I'm going to make sure this dog gets everything it possibly can to become the most optimized, healthiest dog possible. But also, I've been very hesitant when it comes to putting this puppy out in the public around other dogs and just exposed to dangers. It seems as if nowadays, especially because of the internet, there are so many known and unknown dangers out there that a person who is a father or mother of a young child or even a teenager would have some fears about showing or exposing their kids to them. How have you been able to navigate this complicated world and the freedom that you've allowed your kids to have while growing up?
Yeah, I think with my children, I don't think we've ever sheltered them. As much as you want to, at times you think, what are they learning at school? Maybe we can homeschool our kids. Frankly, I don't know that we have the patience to do that. And I think there's real important lessons learned in that socialization. But certainly there is a parent mode that's, I want to protect my children. And so a lot of my friends that have homeschooled, I understand why. And I think that's awesome. At the same time, it's important we expose our kids to certain elements and certain pieces of the world that they live in. And so we've never sheltered our kids, and I think they've been exposed to a lot. But at the same time, it's with our involvement. And so when you're engaged and you're involved, you can help them understand situational awareness, or you can help them understand why life can be hard or why maybe people do bad things. And I think that those conversations are really, really important. I haven't always done the best job of maybe protecting my kids. When I think about the internet, and there's a lot of technology, and there's also a lot of technologies to help intervene and protect. And I wish I was more savvy when it comes to internet and parental controls and things of that nature. We've done some, but I know there's a lot more available as I get more educated. So yeah, there's a balancing act, right? You want to live in the world, but not be so much of that worldly mindset. And so we've definitely, I think, had our kids exposed, and I think that's been healthy and good. But at the same time, we've invested in our kids and made sure that we've had opportunities to talk with them and talk through issues, and we continue to do that. My kids don't always have the same viewpoint I do, and so I want to understand what they're seeing or why they're perhaps feeling a certain way. At the same time, I want them to understand, what's my experience, what's my environment that's helped shape my paradigm and where I'm coming from. So I really appreciate those conversations, and I think that goes a long way to helping to protect your kids so that they're not in situations that could be harmful.
Interesting. One thing that I see a lot of my friends from college, a situation that I see a lot of men right now, is deciding whether or not they want to have kids. It's very prevalent in my generation now to decide to not have kids, whether it's the climate change issue, not knowing if the planet's actually going to be around for their lifespan, or just even like political turmoil going on, I see a group of people my age that are in that camp. And then I also see a group of people my age that are saying, I want to have 12 kids, and I want to raise them on a farm, and I want to homeschool them, I want to do this and that. If you were, let's say, a professor that is talking in front of 500 students, some of which are in each camp, and you were asked about your experience having kids, and if you would recommend it to someone who's contemplating it, what would you say?
It is the best. I mean, I can't imagine life without kids. It's the best experience you'll ever go through. And, Cam, I believe that we're here for a reason. And a big part of the reason we're here is to experience life, and you experience that with a family. So without my mom and dad, I wouldn't be here. And I think, in a spiritual realm, that we're here to have children, and that these experiences are so that we can come here and experience this world and then return back to our Heavenly Father. And that's part of the plan. So to me, the whole plan is based on us having a family, and having children is just a huge part of that.
I completely agree. I've had kind of the same thoughts my entire life. I don't know if it's just from my parents' experience, whatever it may be, but I feel as if all the riches and all the experiences are great, but it doesn't even come close to the type of feeling you can have from having kids. And I'm very glad you're giving that advice. I think that's something that my generation needs to hear more of. I think having kids young and focusing that as a focal point in your life instead of maybe a career or whatever it may be, I think can be very, very rewarding. Now, Tracy, the last question that I give to all my guests is something I want to ask you today, and that is, what is the most important message you feel the world needs to hear right now?
Yeah, thanks. I listened to some of your podcasts, and I realized this is a question you ask at the end. And I recently, I think, listened to Ricky Stafford, and he said love, that you are loved. Everyone is loved, and hopefully everyone feels that love. And I hope my kids feel the love we have in our family, but I also hope those that may not be as fortunate to have a full functioning family, that they know that they're loved. And whether it's by a family member, a friend, for me, I know that my Heavenly Father loves me, and that I'm not alone, that I'm here for a reason. And I just wholeheartedly agree with, the biggest message everyone needs to know is that love is the way. I mean, it's the way to live your life. It's the connection you have with others. And I really have thought a lot about a love in the last year, really since COVID. It puts a lot of things in perspective, and with family comes love. So I'm so appreciative of the family I have and the family I come from. And I think there's nothing more important than the love you have for one another. And it's not just about your family, because we're asked to love our neighbors. And that's been important in my life. So I think love is, I have to agree with Ricky, and I have to agree. I know that you feel the same way, but that's what's most important in life.
Just like Ricky Stafford's podcast, the last question for his podcast brought me to tears. I don't know if people saw that in the recording, but I feel the same when you bring it up right now. To be honest with you, that is my main reason for starting this podcast. The point of questioning everything is so that we can understand people deeper than we did before. When you ask them more questions, when you're asking someone something, you're coming from a place of trying to understand them and having empathy. And the more you do that, the more you realize that this is just another human being, another child. Despite them being 50 to 60, it's another child who is just trying to make their way in this very complicated, confusing world. And asking those questions will lead you to the point of just having love for every other human being that you come across. So, Tracy, I'm really, really glad and appreciate that you came on the podcast today. And I want to finish this by letting you know that I love you. And I'm very glad that you're in my life.
Kim, I love you too. We all love you. We're so proud of what you're doing. And we're so glad you're part of our lives. So keep doing what you're doing. And thanks for the person that you are and that you've become and that you're becoming. So we really look up to you and appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much for the kind words, Tracy. And thank you guys and the rest of the audience for tuning in. We'll be back again next week for another episode.